Hello, in this video I'm going to go over how to make this 6-stitch cabled tree pillow, beginning to end. Now what you will need for this pillow is you can actually make the case, and instead of overlapping it like this, just stitch it closed at the top and stuff it with your own polyfill. I prefer to make it as a case that I can take off and wash, and I can take the pillow out and clean. Now the pillow I got, I don't have the package for it anymore. I should have saved that. But I got it at Joann Fabrics. It was like their cheapest of the cheap pillows they had. It's a 14 by 14. I believe it was like $10 or $12. I had coupon. I paid like $7 for it. Now what I like about this, and I suggest if you buy a pillow to put inside the case, to get a pillow that has a zipper, because then I can open this up if I need to, if I want to add more polyfill, or if, let's say, something got spilled on it and the polyfill got damaged, you can just take it out and place with new, and a bag of polyfill is really, really cheap. The yarn I'm using for this project actually comes in the February 2017 Yarn Box Classic shipment. It's Miss Babs 3-ply Yummy 3-ply Sport yarn. It's 100% super merino wool, and it's 335 yards. You get 2 hanks in your shipment. You see, this is a different color. But you'll get 2 hanks, so that's 670 yards. Of that 670 yards, if you're doing a 14 by 14 pillow, it'll take about around 450 yards of that to complete this project. You will still be left with over 200 yards of yarn, which is enough to do like a neck warmer. There's a few different things you can do with that, but it is enough to do a secondary project. If you're wanting to do 2 pillows out of the yarn that you receive, then I suggest doing either a 10 by 10 or a 12 by 12 pillow, not the 14 by 14. I do go over how to gauge and everything. I'll get in that in a minute. You will need to get buttons if you are going to do it like mine, to where you can take it off. These were just cheap buttons I got on the fly at a craft store. And instead of doing buttonholes, since the cables have the elongated stitches right here, I actually just put the buttons through the cables. But if you want to do buttonholes, you absolutely can. The loom I'm using for this project is the 120 peg 1/4 inch gauge adult hat loom from Cindy Wood Crafts, which direct links for everything I'm mentioning here will be in the description below, along with video clips and a direct link to the PDF. Now please keep in mind, this video is made to go with the PDF, because the PDF will have your chart for the tree. This is kind of what I went off of, so nobody wants to have to deal with this. And you can see where I've made adjustments and row counting, and nobody wants to deal with that. So there'll be a very nice printable chart in the PDF that you can use for this. Now, let's talk about some other items that you may need. Crochet hook to weave in your ends. Your loom tool, of course. Now you're going to need stitch markers. You need stitch markers and ways to mark your pegs. So I've got a few things here, and a tapestry needle. So here's my tapestry needle. I have a few different options here I'm going to go over with you. I'll show you how I have my loom marked out. I have it marked out with rubber bands from the Dollar Tree, 500 for $1. So I've got a bunch of different collars, and that will last me for a very long time. And I use, I think they're the 7mm jump rings. Pull one out and I'll show you what it looks like and why I use these. These are the ones that are they're the coil. I like these because your yarn doesn't stick to them, and what's nice about them is they fit perfectly over top the peg. Now you want to mark all your pegs before you do your cast on. That way everything is kind of stuck on the loom. Now, options for stitch markers, and I'm going to show you why you're going to need stitch markers. The entire background of this pillow is 6-stitch cables. Now, I'm not making it confusing by having them go one way and twist. They're all twisting the same way, just to make it easier. But what you need to do is you'll be taking 3 stitches off, switching them with another 3. So you need stitch markers that are big enough to hold 3 stitches. Ones like this, because you're going to have a few of them on the loom, that is way too big. You can get the shorter ones. See, this is still kind of big because this right here is marking out where my cables are going to be. So another option, it's probably the cheapest option too, just get safety pins. I'm going to show you the size of these safety pins, and these are absolutely perfect. They're very durable. You just need to be able to fit like 3 stitches on them at a time. They're not going to be in the way. So that's what I suggest using. And I got a cheap pack of the little plastic ones because these little ones you use a lot during the tree. Don't get overwhelmed quite yet. I will go over individually every single style of cable and yarn switching, whatever. I will go over all of that individually multiple times throughout this project. Now, I will say this project is not for beginners. You need to have, it'll be a lot easier if you have basic knowledge of how to do cables, because there's a 2-stitch, 2-stitch, 3-stitch, 4-stitch, and 6-stitch cables going in different directions all through this tree. So you need to have basic knowledge of how to do your cable stitches. This background here are purl stitches, and everything else are just E-wrap. Before we get into marking the loom and getting started, I highly recommend that you swatch. Swatching, some people find it wasteful for the yarn, time consuming, and just a pain in the butt. But you will not regret swatching because you will get an accurate gauge of how you knit. The way you knit is going to be different than the way I knit. Now, on the pillow, this is going to stretch a bit. Now, on my swatch, I still wasn't sure which way I was going to do the cables. So one row I did them one way, one row I did them the other. But what you want to do is work up a piece of fabric using this cable pattern I'm using for the background, which we will go over that in a bit. You work up a square. As you can see, I did 1, 2, 3, 4 rows of cables. That's 6, 12, that's 24. And then I had a little bit of a border. I've started making my swatches big enough to be coasters so that I don't feel like I'm wasting the yarn quite as much. But so I did 24 stitches wide here and practiced my cabling. And this is my swatch. Now, to measure your gauge, let me zoom this in some. You can see the texture. You can see the individual stitches here. Now, what we want to do is we need to know how many stitches across it takes to make 1 inch. I've got this awesome little roller. Now, if you look, and it might be easier to look at the back of your material here to catch your stitches correctly, but it is, you just count. So I got 1, 2, see these little side slashes like that? We'll count those as a stitch, and we'll go up to 2 inches. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So if we would have went 1 inch, it would have been 6. 2 inches, it's 11. So every 11 stitches, every 11 pegs that we put on the loom is 2 inches. Now you can measure to get a true gauge. You can do the same this way. It's not super necessary, you mainly need to know your width. So for me, for my swatch, 11 stitches gives me 2 inches. Now I know I have a 14-inch pillow here, and basically how we're making this is a big long rectangle that folds around the pillow, and we sew up the edges. Basically I did my math and everything. It needs to be multiple of 12. That can be the hard part, is making sure it's a multiple of 12. But if it's not perfect, if you need to go a couple pegs more, a couple pegs less, that's fine, because it will stretch. If you have the option, if it's like 2 pegs more or 2 pegs less, I go 2 pegs less just because it will stretch. And when it stretches out a bit, it actually helps these cables stand out. You can see how that's been stretched. So for me, if you're getting the same gauging and you're using the same yarn and the same loom, to mark our loom, start with your rubber bands. And as I said, I'm marking 72 pegs. So I put a rubber band over 6 pegs, leave 6 pegs empty, put a rubber band over 6 pegs, leave 6 pegs empty, and I do this until I get over to where I'm at the right size, which I did a rubber band like this just to mark that this is my last peg. You also have to mark out your tree. And the way we did this is you want it centered on the front. So the first thing I did was mark the middle 2 pegs out of all 72. Now there's a few. The main part of the trunk is a 6-stitch cable. So I have it marked out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are my middle 2. And I got it marked out for 3 and 3 for 6-stitch cables. You can do that however you want. For me, that seemed to work the best. I also need to mark out this inside. Now what I did is I found like the pattern where my tree went. I went 5 stitches over. You can see I got 2 cables. See, I got 2 cables on both sides of the tree to make it even. So this will be 1 cable, this will be 1 cable. So here's the end of this square. And then I counted 5 pegs and I marked again so that I will know for the entire tree part, this through here will always be purl stitches. And I will get in more detail later. And then on this side I have 1 cable, I have 2 cables. All of this is this edge. And I got 5 marked off. That way I know all of these will always be purl stitches when I'm inside the tree area. Really hope that wasn't too confusing. Like I mentioned before, everything is wrote out in detail in the PDF. So please, direct link is in the description below. If you need help measuring out your gauge and size for a different loom or for a different size pillow, please feel free to email me. My email is in the description below. I'm a big fan of the 14-inch pillow because I have the 2 cables on this side. If I go down to like a 10-inch pillow, the front of the pillow is pretty much just going to be the tree. And I like having the extra design and the extra details around the edges. Throw that over to the edge. Okay, so now we can get started. I'm doing this one with a separate collar. So you can see 2 of the different colorway options. There's a whole lot more than that, but that way you can get an idea of 2 of the different ones. We're going to do a chain cast on, but first I have to turn this to this. Whether you spool your yarn or wind it in a ball, whatever you got to do, get your yarn ready to go. Let me get my end here. The cast on we are going to do is called a chain cast on. Now, one thing we're going to do, because we do seam up this edge, you don't want your first peg and your last peg to be the first peg of the cable. So you actually want to run this 1 peg extra on both sides. So I will show you what I mean by that. But to start out with this cast on, we are going to create a slip knot. Let me zoom in here. have to watch out. I got help from our latest family member, Figaro. Anyway, so we got our slip knot. Now this is marking out our cable. So we're actually going to cast on starting with the pink peg, one peg before. See, we got our loop in this hand, we've got our running yarn, fig stop in that hand. You take the running yarn, pull it through that knot, tighten it up. What I do is I take, this is just a little cast on tail, put it in behind just so it's out of the way. This cast on is very simple. You take this new loop you just created, you put it behind the next peg, both strands, pull your working yarn through so that you got 2 strands on the back, 1 strand on front. That is all there is to this cast on. You do this all the way around, each time taking both strands of that loop through and pulling the working yarn through the front. Now this is a crochet chain cast on. There are other ways to do this where you actually use a crochet hook, but it is a lot quicker and a lot easier to do it like this with your hands. So do this all the way to the other end, and I'll show you what to do when you're almost to the other end. So there's the 6 from the last cable. Now this last peg, all we are going to do is sit on there and tighten it up. Push it to the back. At this point we go around and push everything down. I can zoom out now. And you can see all of our stitch markers and everything are held right in place. Let me get back to my swatch here. Ooh, zoom out as far as I can. There we go. Okay, so what we just did is our cast on. The cast on is underneath the flap. Our first 10 rows are garter stitch, followed by 10 rows of just E-wrap. So let's get started with that. First 10 rows of garter stitch. Garter stitch is 1 row E-wrap, 1 row purl stitch. What that means is I'm skipping it, and it actually helps to create a smoother side that doesn't want to curl. And now you can E-wrap the whole row and then knit off, which is just taking your bottom stitch over your top, or you can do it one at a time. I have found that doing one at a time, like this, helps me tremendously with my tension. So go ahead, do this row back to your beginning peg with E-wrap, and then I'll go over briefly how to do a purl stitch if you are unaware. Row 1 is done. Row 2 is your purl stitch. I'll zoom in a little bit for this one. For the purl stitch, you take your loom tool down through the loop on the peg, curl under, and you pull up that string. You just created a new loop. Take the old loop off, put that one on. I'll show you a few more times. Get the focus on my yarn and not the cat. Oops. Okay. Down through, pull up new loop. We're just sliding that old loop off, putting that new one on and tightening it up. Do this all the way to your last peg over here. And that will be your row 2. Row 3 will be E-wrap. Row 4 will be purl stitch. That's what creates the garter stitch, is alternating E-wrap and purl stitch rows. So you're going to do that for your first 10 rows. Then from row 11 to row 20, the next 10 rows, you will just E-wrap. Go ahead and get the first 20 rows done all together, and then I'll start showing you how to do the cables. First 20 rows are done. Actually, it's the first 19 rows. Did 10 rows of garter stitch, and then I've got 9 rows of E-wrap. I am on row 10. But row 10 is where we start our cabling. And what we're going to do is each set of 6 is a cable. We're doing every other one for the first row. So that means I'm starting with the ones with the rubber bands. So I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cables on this first row, which I'll work one of the cables with you. So what we're going to do is I'm using a safety pin, whatever you're going to use as your stitch holder. You're going to take your marked pegs, and we're going to take 3 of those off, put them on the tool here, then close it so we don't lose those stitches. I'd already done this all the way to the other side, so there should be 6. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So now we can get started. Let me zoom this in so you can see how we do this. Now this is another reason why we have an extra peg at the beginning and end, because it would be kind of difficult to do this. There we go, it's focused. It'd be kind of difficult to do this if this stitch wasn't here. So what we're going to do, this is a 6-stitch cable. First 3 stitches are on your stitch holder. Now we got to take the last 3, we got to move them, but we're going to E-wrap it, then move it over, and you tighten it up. E-wrap the second one, move it over, tighten it up, E-wrap the third, move it over, and tighten it up. Now these 3 are the empty ones. I should zoom in here. See if I can get a good view of it right there. So we're going to open up our little stitch holder here. Sorry, I have a kitten walking around everything. We're taking 1 stitch off. Stretch that stitch over and put it on the peg. Sorry, try and hold this still. Then we will E-wrap it. Take the bottom over the top. Maybe I don't need that close. Now we're going to take the second stitch. I gotta get the kitten out of my way. Which this is why I did the stitches. I took like 3, 2, 1 on the peg instead of taking 1, 2, 3, because we gotta take them off in the opposite order we put them on. So I'm getting the second one, which this, it might tighten up some as you're doing your other stitches, which that's kind of normal. This stitch right here was originally the second one. So we're moving it over here to the second. Trying not to poke myself. I'm making this look so much harder than it actually is. There we go. See, I got that second one on there, which I've already E-wrapped that first one, so I'm going to E-wrap the second one. Take the bottom over the top. Now we just have this last stitch to move over. So first I got to get it off this little, there we go, get it off the pin. There we go. We got that third stitch on. E-wrap, oops. There we go, E-wrap it. Then we just keep E-wrapping until we get to the next. Which I'll start this second one with you, just so hopefully there's no confusion. So we E-wrap to the next one. We're going to skip the 3 empty, E-wrap that 4th one, move it to the first, tighten it up a bit, E-wrap the next. Now when you're doing your cables, some of these have the jump rings on them. Just kind of watch them if you're moving your loom around and you've got the stitches off, because you don't have to do these off in advance for the whole row. You can do them as you come to them. Just for me personally, it just seems easier to do them first, and then as I get to them, work it. And now we're just going to do the same thing. These 3 stitches, we'll take that first one, put it here, the second one, put it here, third one, put it there, E-wrap in between each. You can try to put them all up, then E-wrap them, but the reason I put one up and E-wrap it is because that loosens up the tension and makes the next stitch looser. So you will finish this up to the end of the row. Let me zoom out here. Finish that up to the end of the row, and then that's what's giving you, pull this up, this first row with the twist. So when you're done with that first row of cables, you're going to work 7 rows of E-wrap. On your 8th row, you're going to do another cable row, but you can see this time we're doing the opposite cables. So where we are cabling on where the rubber bands are this time, the next time you're going to be cabling the ones in between. So each cable row, until we get to the tree, each cable row you will have 6 cables that you're doing. You're actually going to do this until you're going to do 14 cable rows. So we've done 1 cable row, we're going to do 7 rows of E-wrap, our second cable row, 7 rows of E-wrap, our third cable row, 7 rows of E-wrap, our 4th cable row, 7 rows of E-wrap, our 5th cable row. Just keep doing that. You just want to alternate where you're cabling. So you're cabling every other one each cable row. I hope that makes sense. So go ahead, work up your 14 cable rows all together, and then that will put us where we can start on our tree. We have our 14 rows of cables done. Now I'm going to show you how you can count your rows, how you can count the cables and how you can count the rows in between your cables. Now the cables themselves, they're offset. So you're just going to see like a knot here, here, here. I'll do it this way. So this is 1. Instead of going 1, 2, 3 straight up, you got to go like zigzag. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and it goes up to 14. Now on the back, you can count them too. 1, 2, 3, 4. But remember, you just don't go straight up. You go over. Zigzag up. Now, to count your rows in between your cable stitches, right here was the cable row, and you can tell on the back there's kind of a knot here. Let's see if I can zoom in a little more. See, I've kind of got a raised knot. If I pull my hook down, with the hook facing up, I can kind of bump into it right there. What you do is you kind of hold that down and you count the stitches above it. So we have 1, 2. See this little bar right there? There's 1, there's 2. When you have 7 of these little bars, then you know that your next row is a cable row. But this you need to keep track of, because once we start on the tree part, then we will be you'll be doing the tree in the middle, and then you'll be doing the cables up the side still, which I have marked in the PDF which rows are cable rows. But still, it's easier just to, I always double check just to make sure. Another thing, if you're unsure which set you are supposed to be cabling, just look at your previous set. For me, it's easier to look on the edge. If my previous set is right on this edge, which it wasn't, it was over. So I know my next set would start with these 6. It would do the rubber band ones. So you just do the opposite of what you had before. Alright. Now, let's talk about what to do next. Now that we've got our 14 cable rows done, zoom out a bit more. Now we get to start on the tree. Now the tree I have kind of framed out. It's not going straight to the edge on any side. So first 5 rows are purl stitch. Then we will get into the chart. So now at this point, what you need to do, now we are going to start using our marked pegs that we'd marked with the, now we're going to start paying attention to these pegs. So from here, we will E-wrap to this peg, purl stitch all the way over to the last one here, then E-wrap these. Because you can see this should be enough for 1, 2 cables, and on this side, 1, 2 cables. So we'll have 2 cables running up both sides of the tree. Now I'll go ahead and get over to where you purl and show you what to do. Okay, well, Figs, honey, you're going to have to move. There we go. Okay. I did my 5 rows, which I'll show you what it looks like. You can see the purl stitch. It might help if I turn it this way. The purl stitch is a lot tighter, so that's what it's going to look like. I did the 5 rows, which that 5th row, okay, I'll show you here. That 5th row, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stitches because I did my last cable and I did 2 rows after that cable before I started the purl stitches. So this 7th row is actually the 5th row for this middle part. I've got my stitches, got the first 5 rows done of the purl stitch. Now the purl stitch is a lot tighter, so you got to kind of pull to really be able to see if you need to count your stitches. But your yarn should be coming back from the beginning here. Now that 5th row is actually the 7th row after a cable, because I did that last cable, I did 2 rows of E-wrap, then I started into the purl stitch for the graph part, which is from here to here on the loom. So from here to here, it's purl stitched. These are still E-wrapped. Now I've got the stitches off to do my cables. What we got to go over now is how to read the PDF, the chart. Now there is some written directions, but this chart is really the best way to go about it, which I'll show you on here. We've got to here, so now we're going to be starting on the very bottom of the tree trunk and working our way up, and you can see that's a cable row. There's a cable there, and there's a cable there. Alright, so first of all, here's the chart. This isn't the finished chart. The chart in the PDF is going to be a little different because there's going to be a few corrections I'll make along the way. But what I did basically was I graphed out what the finished product of the tree will look like. And then I used the slashes to let you know where you're moving stitches. These stitches with the pegs with the blocks with the slashes on them, if the slash is going that way, you're moving the stitch in that direction. If the slash is going this way, you're moving the stitch in this direction. So we'll look down here at the bottom. So for your first row, what you'll do, this chart is just showing from here to here. This is from peg 1 to, what's the last peg? Peg 40 or 41, from peg 1 like to peg 40 over here, or 41. These first 5 that are marked off, and these last 5, you do nothing but purl stitch for the entire tree pattern. After the tree, when you're done with the tree, then we'll get back into doing this pattern to finish it up. But you ignore, these are just purl stitched. That's why they're separated out. And it also gives you, like, this is peg 1 when you're counting. So what you'll do, the blocks right here that are colored in, that is marking the rows that you're doing your cables on the outside of the tree spot. So your background cables is what I'll call those. That's marked off in the chart. The yellow rows are marking off the tree trunk cables, like the cables right here on the trunk of the tree itself. I just did the collars because it's still marked in the pattern, which basically what this means is these 3 stitches will be going in front of these 3. So, this is the exact same, the 6-stitch cable as you've been doing in the background. That's just how it's wrote up for this. These are E-wraps. These will be E-wraps too, but these stitches you'll take off, and you'll move these 3 stitches over and then place those stitches back on just like you were doing. For this graph, the whole background is purl stitched. If the block is empty and there's no circle in it or slash, then that block will be purl stitched. And you can see I had to correct some down here. Like for this, row 1, the yarn is coming from this direction, this side. You're working this way. You're going to purl stitch the first 15 pegs, peg 16 through 25. You will E-wrap, which peg 20 and 21 are marked out. See how they're yellow here? That's the exact center, and that's what's marked right here, is peg 20 and 21. These 2 just mark out the boundaries for the main part of the trunk, for like the 6-stitch cable part, just to give you a border. But what you'll do, your E-wraps, and you'll purl out, and you'll do whatever you need to do outside of the pattern. You know, you got a cable row that you'll be doing. Your next row, you're coming from this direction. And so peg 25 to 16, you will E-wrap, and you'll finish out the row. For that 3rd row, what you're going to do is you will purl stitch to peg 15, sorry. Peg 16, you are going to E-wrap. 17 will be a purl stitch. And what you're going to do is you will take the loop from peg 17 off, put the loop from peg 16 on it, and then move 17 over. I will show you, I'm on row 3 of the tree, and I wanted to work this part of it with you just to explain a little better what to do. So we're at row 3, so we know the yarn started from this end and we're going this direction. So we purl stitch to peg 15, then we will E-wrap peg 16, purl stitch peg 17, E-wrap peg 18 through 23, then purl stitch 24, E-wrap 25. Let me see, I'll zoom in on this so you can see this better. Leave this in the background. That right here is where we're at. So I'm right here. This is peg 16. So this one, we E-wrap this peg, then we purl stitch this one, then we E-wrap the rest of these. I'll E-wrap one more. E-wrap all those. That's these middle green ones. And then purl stitch one, E-wrap one, and then we get back into our purl stitches, which I'm just doing a couple to lock those in place because I'm going to show you what we do. I can go ahead and knit those off because those are already done. Oops. Okay. This is where you might want a stitch marker. Let me move that because it's wanting to focus on that and not this. This was E-wrapped. This was purl stitched. So I'm going to take the stitch that was purl stitched off, put it on the loom, on the stitch holder. Peg 16 that was E-wrapped, I moved over. And now the peg that was purl stitched, I moved over. Anytime there is one of the slants, the slant always goes in front of the other stitch. So we will go ahead and do this side. This was the purl stitch. That was peg 23. Wait, no, sorry. Peg 24. I was looking at the wrong row. So peg 23, we're going to take off and move over. Or peg 25. And then peg, the original stitch from peg 24, we are putting on peg 25. I'll show you what you've just done. You see right here where the stitches are kind of going in? I'll show you what would happen if we didn't switch those stitches, because my first try at this tree went very bad, and this is red and it's kind of hard to pick up detail with red. Got to get the lights off of it. Hold on a minute, I gotta move my lighting. I don't think that helped any. Okay, here's my first try. But see how the top, you can't tell that's a tree. Because what I did was for my graph, all of these were just E-wraps. I wasn't switching stitches or flipping them around or anything. But what you want is you want everything to flow. You can see how the stitches just flow together. And that's because we're moving the stitches to do so. There we go. Okay, so I hope that made sense. Go ahead and work your pattern up to about row 25, because you're going to do another row of E-wrap, and you'll have another row where what we're doing is we're decreasing right now for the base of the trunk. So you get those done, and this is just E-wraps and purls. You have a couple cable rows. After the second cable row, then I'll kind of help get you started with how to move some of these stitches around, just so that there's no confusion with any part of it. I'm at row 26 of the tree, which I'm on this end. It's going in this direction now. I wanted to show you something. You're going to E-wrap all of these, but this one, you're going to switch with this one. This one, you'll switch with that one. And I've got, move it, kitty cats. Okay. So, I'll go ahead and show you. Let me zoom this in. I already worked the stitches up to where I will be E-wrapping. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Which I'll show you on here. There's 8 stitches there. This row right here. We're going to E-wrap these 8 stitches, and I'll show you how to switch them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Sorry, Figaro thinks the ball of yarn is a toy. I'm going to go ahead and purl just a couple stitches past it. Then I can go ahead and switch the stitches around. Where are we at? So these two need switched, but this one needs to be in front of this one. So we're going to take that second one, Just pulling it off for a second. Just hold it back there. Move this one over. Then take this stitch and put back on. Now, if you're noticing the stitches are really tight to leave twisted and put on, if you need to like untwist the stitch to put it on the peg, that's fine. It really doesn't make a big difference in the finished project. So these two, this was my last E-wrap one on this side. Because right now we are increasing part of the trunk because we're doing the limbs. So this is where the trunk is, so it's coming out. So this one, take that one off. Pick this one up, move over. Then take this one and put on that peg. So again, I'll show you here. Here are the 8 ones, because when we're twisting this around, we're putting this in front, and it makes it look like the limb's going that way. So for all of these stitches, that's what you'll be doing. You just got to follow the way it says, like you'll be E-wrapping both of those. Up here, when I get to some of the empty pegs here, where you're switching a purl stitch with an E-wrap stitch, I'll show you how to do that. I am on row 40 of the pattern, which I'm going to pull this under, of the chart I mean. You can see I'm starting from this end and going across. Now I've already done the row, and I E-wrapped where I needed to E-wrap, and I purled where I needed to purl. Now I'm going to show you some of the different techniques for switching the stitches. Now let's zoom out, let's look. So we did this one right here. We go across. These two are right here. Those I just knit off. They don't get switched, they don't get nothing. And then over here, hold this up because I want to make sure you can see. So those two, nothing happens to them, they just get knit off. The next spot's going to be this one. As you can see where my stickers kind of pulled up some of the ink, so ignore that. But this stitch needs to go in front of that one. They need to twist. So making sure I'm at the right place. Yep, because here are my center marks. So I will take this one off, move this one over, and move this one there. And of course there's none through this. We get them on the other side of the trunk. We got right here. This one is the one with the slant, and it slants that way, so this one needs to go in front. That one goes in front, and this one, oops, there we go. After that, we have two that I just knit off. Then these last two, I will switch. That one knits off, and this one knits off, but what you're going to see is there's only one stitch left. That's because right here, that's a purl stitch, but we are putting this stitch in front of that one. Now your purl stitches can be a lot tighter too, so when I try to knit as loose as I can, just because sometimes your tension can get very, very tight. Now with the purl stitches, you don't want to twist them. You want them to kind of stay the same if at all possible, just because that will kind of screw up the look a little bit. Now if your E-wraps, or it's a twisted knit stitch as one E-wrap actually is, if those stitches get untwisted, it's really not that big of a deal. But you can see this is where I'm at, and I think that kind of puts it to where I've showed you about all the different ways that I'm switching here. You just keep following the pattern, And just keep switching your stitches until you get to your last one. After you're at your last one up here on row 62, do 5 rows of purl stitch like you did at the beginning. Like you did at the beginning here, do your 5 rows of purl stitch. And one thing I did, the chart with the pattern will be marked out differently. And this row right here is going to be yellow, and this row on the end here is going to be yellow because that's that first peg right here with the marked peg for your edging, because it does run up that first peg just for a few stitches, but these 4 right here will never have anything other than purl stitches on them for the entire tree pattern. The same thing goes for this side. I just wanted to make that clear because I was editing the rest of the video and it was a little unclear of exactly how that goes. So finish out the tree pattern, do your 5 rows of purl stitch, then all you do is you get right back into this pattern. The tree is done and I've done the 5 rows of purl stitch after it. Oh, Figs, you gotta move. Right here. I've done those. Now at row 3 I did another cable row. So we've got the cable and we did 2 rows after. Now what you'll need to do is you actually do 5 rows of E-wrap before your next cable row. You just keep doing the 9 cable rows are done. After that, I did 9 rows of E-wrap and 10 rows of garter stitch. We are at the cast off point, which I'm using just a basic cast off for this. What you want to do is you want to E-wrap first 2 pegs, put the second peg on the first, knit off, move the first peg over. Then we E-wrap 2 pegs, second peg on first, knit off, move it over. This is all you do for the cast off. I'll do a couple more with you. You're just working 2 at a time. If you need, I do have other videos that show how to do this. So you E-wrap 2, knit both off, take the second one, put it on the first, knit off, move the first over. Then I'm down to 3 pegs. So we E-wrap 2, knit off, move the second to the first, knit off, move the first over. Then we E-wrap 2. Okay. When we have just this one left, all you do is pull the working yarn up through it. You go ahead and cut your yarn, pull it up through, and then that will lock that in and you are done. I'll show you what this cast off looks like. Now the cast off and cast on I did are not exact. Here, I'll show them both up close. But this is going to be under this one. Let me zoom out. Hey Figs. At this point, we need to do very, very light blocking for it, which all you want to do, take the whole thing. You can go ahead and weave your ends in with a crochet hook and cut the ends off. Take the whole thing, soak it in cold water, and then what I do is you kind of push the excess water out. You don't want to twist it, you don't want to stretch it, you don't want to like wring it out. So I'll soak it and then I'll kind of push out some of the excess water, and then I'll just sort of fold it over, put a towel under it and a towel on top of it, and I actually just step on it and press as much of the water out as I can. and then I'll show you how to seam up the water. What that did was that relaxed all the stitches, and it helps this edge to not want to curl quite as much. Now we are going to stitch this inside out to go around the pillow. So we will be doing this top flap first, because when it's flipped inside out, this will be the flap on the outside. Now I've already done my measuring, but I'll go ahead and show you. You want your pillow you want the tree in the middle of the front of your pillow. When you first put it on here, it's going to look like it's not going to fit, but it will stretch out and fit. If your measurements and everything are the same as mine, then what you will be doing, let me get this straightened out, is you have 3.5 cables above it and 3.5 cables below it. So you just look at these knots. We got 1, 2, 3. Here's the 4th one. What I do is I fold the 4th over to match the 3rd, and then I get started. And you'll be able to feel, because there is, make sure I got this right. 1, 2, 3, yeah, 3 and 4. Zoom this in. Just very, very simple. You can use any method that you'd like, but if you've got this folded right, you should have loops on the end on both sides. What we are seaming with are the last stitch here. So there's going to be the 2 strands. You're going to pick up both of those, and that's what we're working with. So for the first, get the 2 that are closest on the end, run the needle through. No, Figaro, you can't have the yarn. And leave a few inches out to weave in. All we're going to do is we're going to go down, we're going to pick up the next stitch, and then we're going to go on this side, run it through the next, and then pick up the next, go to the top, and I'm going to run it through the next up there. It's pretty simple. You do this all the way down to the end. So we got the next here, and we got the next down here. You just stitch it all closed, and what you will do, let me zoom back out. You will go, oh, Figaro, you gotta move, buddy. Okay, you'll go all the way down this edge, sew it up. Then you will make sure you got your measurement the same on this side, and then you'll sew all the way down to this edge. Then you will measure on this side your 3.5, and you will sew both of these sides up. I have everything sewn up on the edges, and I'll show you how this looks. Now I've already sewn the buttons on. I'm not going to push them through until it's dry, but I'll be pushing one through here and one through this side. And then the buttons will be coming out like that. That's it, guys. That's everything for this pattern. I really hope you guys enjoyed this pattern. And if you do have any questions or comments, actually my email is in the description below. Just email me with any questions. If it's just a comment, leave the comment in the description below. Of course, there's a link to yarn box, the yarn itself, the loom I got, the PDF. Now, there is an alteration you can do to this. If you don't want to do the tree, you can actually just do this pattern, just this pattern here, front and back, and it'll still look really, really nice. Well, guys, that's all I've got for you guys. I just got to let this dry, and then it is completely done. Thank you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.